well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me today. 2 weeks until Election Day. Are you ready? Are you tired of the campaign ads? Are you tired of the robocalls and the robo-texts that you've been getting? I don't know what happened, but until about 6 weeks ago, somehow I had managed to avoid all of these texts, but I clicked the wrong link. I did something, and now all of a sudden campaigns have my information, and I'm getting spam multiple times a day. What's weird, though, is I don't have a local area code, so I'm getting texts about races that I can't vote in. We need smarter robobots, I guess, when it comes to the campaign outreach here. Hopefully, you are not being inundated with those messages, and we are, fingers crossed, again, just about 2 weeks away from getting a break from all of that. And we are going to be talking about the election on today's show. You know, we had Mark Walters from Armed American Radio on yesterday, and I said at one point when Mark was talking about how he doesn't understand how anybody could be undecided at this point, I said, maybe the decision's not between whether they're voting for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Maybe the decision is whether they're going to vote at all, right? I think when you look at the two candidates at the top of the ticket, both of them underwater in terms of their popularity. This is a hold your nose election for a lot of Americans, certainly at the presidential level. But I think the same is true for a lot of down ticket races. We're going to be talking about one of those races, which is in Indiana, the 6th congressional district. It's currently held by Greg Pence, but Pence announced that he's stepping down. And so earlier this year, there was a very contested primary. A lot of folks running because, again, this is a pretty conservative district. The Republican has the advantage, right? Not guaranteed to win, but you got a leg up if you are the Republican nominee. So the candidate that emerged from this contested primary, a guy named Jefferson Shreve, he won the the Republican primary with 28% of the vote. So hardly an overwhelming favorite. I think the second place candidate had 22% of the vote. And if the name Jefferson Shreve sounds familiar, it's because we talked about him a little bit at Bearing Arms, and I think maybe even on the podcast last year. He ran for the mayor of Indianapolis as a Republican. And in doing so, he lost, by the way, by about 20 points. But in doing so, he adopted a lot of gun control policies and made them his own. Now, he's singing a different tune. WISH-TV in Indianapolis reports that Shreve spent more than $14 million of his own money making a name for himself in his failed bid to unseat Democratic Mayor Joe Hogsett last year. They go on to say what voters may not recognize are some of Shreve's positions. As a mayoral candidate, for example, Shreve rolled out a gun control plan that ignited a backlash from conservatives. On his new campaign website, though, Shreve emphasizes his strong support for the Second Amendment. When asked to explain the discrepancy, Shreve likened his change in priorities to applying for a different job. He said, I was applying to be chief executive for the city that had a front and center challenge of gun violence. That's not the job I'm asking people to consider me for today. Ooh, I got to say, I have issue with that. Because, first of all, your opponent is going to say, what? So you're saying that gun violence is not an issue across Indiana? Gun violence is an issue for the people of the 6th District of Indiana? I don't think it's a winning argument that, well, I'm applying for a different job now, so I'm going to hold different views. And by the way, it's not like Jefferson Shreve came out last year and said, you know what, maybe background checks are a good idea, but that's as far as I'm going to go. Mm-mm. This is a story from the Indianapolis Star, July 13th, 2023. Headline: Republican mayoral candidate Shreve calls for stricter gun control in public safety plan. At a news conference Thursday at the Vanguard restaurant in Broad Ripple, a community that saw 3 shooting fatalities on one weekend in June of last year, Shreve said, quote, crime is rampant in Indianapolis and it calls for systemic change. We're on track to break yet another crime record this year. He then accused the incumbent mayor, Joe Hogsett, of failing to improve Indianapolis public safety and of not having a plan. Shreve had told the Indy Star in April that he has an NRA membership that dates back to him having taken their handgun safety course in 2011 when he bought a handgun that he still owns. But that was the extent of his involvement in the NRA. So last year, Shreve distancing himself from the National Rifle Association. But then the Indianapolis Star says, here's what Shreve proposed he would do if elected mayor. In a break from his Republican colleagues at the Indianapolis City County Council and the Indiana General Assembly, Shreve called for working with the state legislature to give Indianapolis the ability to set its own stricter gun control laws. In other words, he wanted to undo Indiana's firearm preemption law. Now, as the mayor of Indianapolis, he could not have done that. It still would have required the state legislature to make that change, but he was calling for that change. He also said that he would seek legislative approval for raising the legal age to purchase a gun from 18 to 21, repealing permitless carry, and banning assault weapons, quote unquote. All right, so again, this isn't just a matter of, vague talk about improving public safety by expanding background checks or even what we hear from Kamala Harris, right? Saying, well, we can protect the Second Amendment and protect people's lives. No, Hogsett said that Indianapolis needed stricter gun control laws in place. And he said that if he was elected mayor, again, this isn't 2013, 1993. This was 12 months ago. This was last year when he ran for mayor. A little bit more than a year and a half ago, I guess, or a little bit less than a year and a half ago since he made these first comments. But he never rescinded his support for gun control when he was running for mayor. So, again, in 2023, Jefferson Shreve said, we need to ban so-called assault weapons. We need to raise the age to exercise your Second Amendment rights from 18 to 21. We need to repeal firearms preemption so that Indianapolis can set its own gun control policies, which would be far more restrictive than state law. That's a given, even in a red state like Indiana, or Indianapolis is a pretty blue speck. Now, what does Jefferson Shreve have to say? Well, here is what is listed on his current campaign website. Protect the Second Amendment. The right to bear arms is enshrined in our U.S. Constitution. I will support the Second Amendment in Congress and advocate for policies that promote responsible gun ownership. When I became a gun owner years ago, I completed an NRA-authorized firearms training and gun safety program. That's the very sort of personal responsibility-centered policy that I will advocate for. I got to tell you, if I were a voter in Indiana's 6th Congressional District, I'd feel a hell of a lot more comfortable voting for Jefferson Shreve if he had actually said, I no longer support a ban on so-called assault weapons. I no longer support raising the age to exercise your Second Amendment rights from 18 to 21. And in Congress, firearms preemption really doesn't, matter that much, right? We don't have a federal preemption law. But it would have been nice to hear Jefferson Shreve say, I was wrong to call for the repeal of preemption in Indiana. We didn't get any of that. There's no accountability. There's no reckoning with the positions that he took just a year ago. So why would gun owners turn out and vote for Jefferson Shreve? Well, because the alternative is even worse. Jefferson Shreve's campaign opponent is a woman named Cindy Worth. According to WISH-TV, she has not raised a lot of money for the campaign. Shreve, by the way, owned a self-storage company that he sold 2 years ago and got $590 million in the sale. So good for him. I mean, that's Powerball money right there. So he spent about $14 million of his own money running for mayor last year. He spent about $4.5 million on the Republican primary. WISH-TV does not say how much Shreve has spent so far in this congressional campaign, but they do note that Worth has raised, I believe, about $15,000 cash on hand. Wow. She thinks, though, according to WISH-TV, that she has a compelling narrative to sway voters. She says, we had a family of 4 living on my teacher's salary. I understand the issues of living paycheck to paycheck because I've lived it. And she remains optimistic about the uphill battle in her campaign, saying that she has the same mantra as Destiny Wells, the Democratic candidate for Attorney General in Indiana. It's a purple state with a turnout problem. I don't know about that. She says we can't forget we were a swing state in 2008, which was the last time a Democrat won in Indiana in the presidential race. She said, when you look at the demographics, we're the same people living here. We know that those values are there. See, and again, I would say that the values, particularly when it comes to our Second Amendment rights, it's the Democrats that have strayed. In 2008, you still had Democrats who were firmly supportive of gun control, but they didn't talk much about bringing back a ban on so-called assaultants, right? There was still, no pun intended, gun shy after Al Gore's embrace of a ban on so-called assaultants in 2000 helped result in his defeat to George W. Bush. So 2008, Democrats were still skittish, right? That was 4 years after John Kerry, took to the fields and went goose hunting and came back and bragged that he had bagged a goose, but he wasn't carrying it because, my arms are tired. Since then, in fact, in 2008, at least a quarter of the Democrats in Congress were rated A by the NRA. I don't think there's a single one in Congress this year. The NRA has endorsed one Democrat for Congress this year, Mary Peltola from Alaska, who, by the way, looks like she's struggling against Nick Begich, the Republican candidate in that race. Again, the Democrats are the ones that have veered sharply to the left, while the voters in Indiana may very well be much the same as they were 15 years ago. And in running in a conservative district, in a conservative state, Cindy Worth should be one of those Democrats who says, hey, you know what? We've gone too far when it comes to our support for gun control. And I recognize that. So I will be a leader trying to bring our party back to sanity when it comes to your right to keep and bear arms. That is not, however, the campaign that Cindy Worth is running this year. On Worth's campaign website, when you go to the issues, there is a section on, let me make sure that I get the title right, because it's not gun control, right? We don't call it gun control. Oh, no. It is, okay, it's under priorities, not issues. Common sense gun laws is how she describes this. And when you go to that section of her website, here's what you see. Big banner with the Moms Demand Action logo, right? So right there, we got an issue here. That's not somebody who is running to the right of where most Democrats are when it comes to our right to keep and bear arms. She says, Cindy supports common sense gun laws needed to keep our children, schools, and neighborhood safe. She goes on to say, channeling her inner Tim Walz, I guess, Cindy grew up shooting hunting rifles with her brother and grandfather. Her grandfather was an Indiana NRA member who advocated strongly for gun safety. It was drilled into the children in the family. Cindy has target shot and skeet shot. She learned to bow hunt and hunt invasive species underwater with a spear. She understands the thrill that comes with feeling and controlling the power of shooting a gun and a bow. She knows what it is to hunt, clean, and eat your prey. These experiences do not change her immovable position that guns should be well regulated, firearm background checks expanded, and gun safety programs also expanded. Cindy does not believe in taking everyone's guns away. So now she's channeling her inner Kamala Harris, right? She believes that the outrageous, fear-mongering Second Amendment claims made by the gun industry against these common sense gun safety regulations needs to stop. Most gun owners, she says, support common sense gun safety regulations. She goes on to say, Cindy is a teacher and a mother. She has seen the fear in her own children's eyes as well as her students' eyes when inside a locked-down classroom and following the aftermath of a school or mass shooting in another geographical location. Common sense gun safety regulations are a must, she says, for the future of our children and our communities. So Worth herself does not explicitly say we need a gun ban. But if she's touting the support of Moms Demand Action wants a semi-auto ban. Kamala Harris wants a ban on so-called assault weapons. Tim Walz wants a ban on so-called assault weapons. So I think it is fair to say that Cindy Worth would, in fact, vote for a ban on so-called assault weapons if she were elected to Congress. And there's the problem for the voters in Indiana's 6th congressional district. You've got one candidate who is an out and proud gun control advocate. You've got another candidate who, I'm going to be polite here and say is wishy-washy when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms. A year ago, Jefferson Shreve again backed a semi-auto ban, backed raising the age to purchase a firearm from 18 to 21. Presumably, he would have also backed raising the age to carry a firearm from 18 to 21. Wanted to undo firearms preemption law and, again, distanced himself from the NRA, whereas now he's saying, I took an NRA-approved firearm safety course in 2011. So what do you do if you're a gun owner and a Second Amendment voter in Indiana's 6th congressional district? Do you hold your nose and vote for Jefferson Shreve, knowing that he very well could flip-flop if he's elected to Congress, knowing that he has not been particularly forthright about how his positions have evolved over the past 12 months? I mean, it's one thing. It's bad enough when Kamala Harris refuses to talk about her support for a handgun ban in San Francisco in 2005. She refuses to discuss her support for D.C.'s handgun ban in 2007. She refuses to explain why she told the Supreme Court in 2007 it should not find that the Second Amendment protects an individual right to keep and bear arms. Though she now says, well, I'm a gun owner myself, and anybody comes to my home, they're going to get shot. She won't offer any details about when she bought that gun, whether it was a off-roster handgun in California, not available to most citizens, right? She hasn't even explained if or when she actually changed her mind about the Second Amendment protecting an individual right to keep and bear arms. Those positions, though, go back, 2005, 2007, 2022. She did call the Bruin decision, said it defied common sense in the Constitution. So that was only 2 years ago. She also refuses to explain that comment. But if we're going to go after Kamala Harris for her previously held positions that she may still believe, if we're intellectually honest, don't we have to say the same thing about Jefferson Shreve, a Republican running for Congress, who 12 months ago embraced an extreme anti-gun agenda, an extreme anti-Second Amendment agenda? I think we do. Now, again, of those two candidates, who is more likely to stand up for our right to keep and bear arms? Despite his previous statements, I think you have to give it to Jefferson Shreve. If for no other reason than Shreve appears to be willing to say and do what he believes the voters in a particular race want him to do. So when he was running for the mayor of Indianapolis, he thought that the voters in Indianapolis wanted him to embrace gun control, so he did. Now he's running in a much more conservative congressional district. He believes that the voters want him to protect the Second Amendment, so that's what he says he'll do. And if he wants to stay in Congress, I'd say he's going to be more inclined to toe the party line, to respect the wishes of voters, to protect the Second Amendment, than Cindy Worth, the candidate who, again, proudly backs Moms Demand Action, talks about the need for common sense gun safety laws. But again, I don't think it's going to be an easy choice for a lot of gun owners in the 6th congressional district. Just as, again, at the presidential level, I don't think this is going to be an easy choice for some Americans, not necessarily because of Second Amendment issues. That there's a pretty clear delineation, even with Donald Trump's, past support for a administrative ban on bump stocks, his comments about, a due process later, take the guns first, when he initially talked about being in favor of red flag laws. Trump's first instincts in the past have not always been great when it comes to the Second Amendment, but his actual actions have been far more supportive of the right to keep and bear arms than anything Kamala Harris has done. So that, I think, is a pretty easy choice. I think it's actually a tougher decision for gun owners and Second Amendment voters in Indiana's 6th congressional district. And again, I think this is going to be a hold your nose election. I think Jefferson Shreve is going to win, but I certainly hope that the voters in Indiana 6 will hold his feet to the fire to actually stand up and support our right to keep and bear arms, and not to flip-flop once again if he's elected to Congress. All right, turning our attention now to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. Let's start there. Not a true recidivist report, but I wanted to highlight this because, we've heard so much from the Biden-Harris campaign about the need for more federal regulation, right? We got to crack down on, they never say we're going to crack down on law-abiding gun owners, but that's generally where they're going, right? But they have announced, listen, we're going after straw purchasers, we're going after firearm traffickers, which sounds good in theory, until you see headlines like this. Boston man sentenced to probation for role in firearm trafficking and straw purchasing conspiracy. Yeah. Cracking down, are we? Because it sure doesn't look like it. Not in this case, anyway. According to Hoodline.com, a Boston man sentenced to 3 years probation. So not long at all. For his role in a firearm trafficking and straw purchasing conspiracy. 23-year-old Shaquem Grant pleaded guilty in May of last year and received his sentence from U.S. District Court Judge Patty Saris last Friday. Which is amazing that it took over a year for him to receive a sentence after pleading guilty. He was pled guilty to a one count of conspiracy to make false statements and records required to be kept by an FFL, as well as one count of aiding and abetting the making of false statements in those records. In charges dating back to January of last year, Grant, along with his co-conspirators Corey Daigle and Gustavo Rodriguez, were implicated in a scheme that ran from August of 2022 through November of 2022, during which false records were created to conceal illegal gun sales. Daigle is an FFL. Rodriguez is a primitive person. They allegedly collaborated with Grant to falsify documentation that obscured the identity of the real buyer of these guns, Rodriguez. And then they tried to cover it up by providing misleading information to law enforcement. One of the guns that was sold was linked to a shooting outside of Rodriguez's home just 2 weeks after the sale. It was later found in the possession of a juvenile in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Daigle and Rodriguez entered guilty pleas in August of this year and November of last year, respectively. Daigle and Rodriguez have not yet been sentenced. But again, their co-conspirator, Shaquem Grant, who is basically the buyer, it sounds like, 3 years probation. That's it. So, again, when we talk about cracking down, or the Biden-Harris administration talks about cracking down on firearms traffickers, is this it? Is this what they're talking about? Because this seems more like a slap on the wrist to me. You know, the National Shooting Sports Foundation has the Don't Lie for the Other Guy campaign, where they warn if you engage in a straw purchase, you could go to prison for 10 years. Yeah, you could. You could also get 3 years probation, which doesn't sound like much of a deterrent to me. But I guess for the Biden-Harris administration, this is a success, right? They got the conviction, and that's all that counts, even if the defendant walks away with a slap on the wrist and a kiss on the cheek. All right, today's armed citizen story from Seattle, Washington. Here's the headline: man shot in altercation outside of Georgetown neighborhood gas station. You got to read pretty far into the story to find the self-defense aspect here. But it does exist. KIRO in Seattle says there was a shooting outside of a gas station in the Georgetown neighborhood on Monday evening. Detective Munoz with the Seattle Police Department said officers responded to calls of a shooting at a Chevron station on East Marginal Way South shortly after 6 o'clock yesterday evening. The store clerk, who was identified as the victim by Seattle police, was in his car in the Chevron parking lot when he saw two people, man and a woman, reportedly smoking narcotics outside of the store. Don't know what it was that they were smoking, but it wasn't tobacco. Store clerk then approached the pair and said, "Hey, you need to leave," at which point a verbal argument ensued between the store clerk and the man. During that argument, the man, who was identified as the suspect by Detective Munoz, threatened that he had a gun. It's unclear whether he displayed the firearm, but KIRO reports that around the same time the man threatened that he had a gun, a glass window at the Chevron shattered. So maybe he did have a gun, maybe he pulled it, maybe he even pulled the trigger. Fearing the involvement of a gun, the store clerk then ran back to his car and grabbed his own firearm. According to the Seattle police, the man who was allegedly smoking narcotics in the parking lot then quickly approached the clerk in the clerk's car, which is when the clerk fired once, hitting the man in the abdomen. The suspect made it back across the street to a Jack in the Box parking lot before collapsing. When officers arrived, they provided aid until Seattle Fire arrived and took the man to a Harborview Medical Center in, quote, serious but stable condition. Describing the injuries, Seattle police said they were not life-threatening, said that the individual will be detained by the police pending an investigation. Now, KIRO reports that the suspect was not found to have a gun on his person, but the woman reportedly ran from the scene, so it is possible that the individual was armed, either originally when he threatened the clerk, or even when he approached the clerk in his car, and perhaps the woman grabbed the gun and took off. Seattle police reports the store clerk was cooperative. Both the store clerk's gun and a shell casing were taken by police at the scene. Hopefully the clerk gets his gun back because Seattle police said it is reasonable to assume that fear of self-defense or fear of harm, actually, was the reason for shooting. So this would have been considered an act of self-defense. The store clerk was not arrested, even though his gun was taken. But further investigation is ongoing. We'll keep you updated on any additional details that become available. But again, hopefully the store clerk will quickly get his firearm back. Sounds like he needs his gun while he is on the job. And hopefully he at least has a backup option when he goes back to work at the Chevron station. All right, finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A Greenville, North Carolina man helping those folks hit hard by Hurricane Helene, get the ability to communicate by securing Starlink services. You know, I can tell you, I mean, when you go through a natural disaster like that and you are just cut off from the world, you know, obviously in a situation like what we're seeing in, you know, North Carolina, Georgia, even Southwest Virginia, I mean, it is difficult for authorities to communicate when the cell towers are down, when the internet services are gone. But Sean Hendricks, who lives in Greenville, North Carolina, has, according to WITN, helped set up more than 60 Starlink internet units for those impacted by Hurricane Helene. A lot of them not just to, you know, individual homes, but to local institutions. One of them was Excel College in Black Mountain, North Carolina. It's become a donation distribution center. But without internet connectivity, it's hard to actually organize the goods that are coming in and how they're going to get distributed. So Sean Hendricks said, I got a call from the Y'all Squad, which is a disaster relief group. He said they were flying in 30 Starlinks. We couldn't find anybody with connections on the ground. He said, I tried to call around and couldn't find anybody. So I said, you know what? I'll just drive up there. Since then, he has ordered more than $50,000 worth of Starlink dishes, has set up more than 60 Starlink units in Western North Carolina. He's received a ton of donations from folks following him on X. He said, I almost felt like I shouldn't ask for help, like I should make this work, but I realized I was basically robbing people who can't come into the zone to help with the ability. So I put my Venmo out there and thought, hey, if I can get a couple more, great. He said, I've raised over $50,000 through Venmo. Head of campus life at Excel College, Andrew Chambers, says, we could not communicate with anybody. He said, so the next day, I think it's between 48 and 72 hours after the storm rolled in, Sean rolls up and says, hey, I've got a Starlink for you. Brought it in, and it was a complete game changer. Black Mountain Home for Children is another institution that has benefited from the generosity of Hendricks and his supporters. The president of that organization, Jimmy Harmon, says one of the things we've been worried about, he says we've experienced a lot of support right now, but will that support dry up when Christmas comes around? Because our kids, you know, we want them to have a great Christmas, and Sean's been committed to helping us with Christmas for our kids. So that is fantastic. You know, Elon Musk has said that Starlink service will be free for those in the disaster zones until January of next year. And then I think it's going to be $120 a month. That's what I pay for my Starlink here in rural Central Virginia. And I can tell you, it really is a lifeline. I mean, when we first moved to outside of Farmville back at the end of 2012, our options for internet were DSL or like Dish Network. Both of which were so slow, it was basically unusable. I mean, we couldn't stream video. I couldn't do my show from my home like I do now. But Starlink has been an absolute game changer. And again, helping to just, you know, get these hard-hit communities back up in contact with the outside world so they can better coordinate these supplies coming in. That is a huge benefit. So to all of those good Samaritans helping to get communications going once again in Western North Carolina, as well as Sean Hendricks for all of his work, we thank you for your very, very good deed. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you, as always, for being a part of the program. Looking forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. Don't forget, on Wednesdays, we do our VIP Gold live chat with Hot Air's Ed Morrissey, 1:30 Eastern. Love for you to be a part of that. If you are not yet a VIP Gold member, well, just go to bearingarms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code SAVEAMERICA for a significant savings on your VIP Gold membership or your VIP membership. Or if you want to go all the way, become a VIP Platinum member. You get all the benefits of VIP and VIP Gold, plus you'll get access to Town Hall TV. You'll get a discount in the Town Hall merch store. I believe you get a even a special gift card when you sign up for the Town Hall merch store. And you'll get the ability to contact the writers at Town Hall, including Red State, Twitchy, PJ Media, and Bearing Arms directly. So again, just go to bearingarms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code SAVEAmerica and sign up today. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.